Just moments ago in this program, we talked about how the United States isn't exactly making and exporting as much stuff as it used to. Thankfully, it looks like certain individuals have decided to step up to the task. There's Glenn Beck, who just this week decided to announce plans to hold a Restoring Courage rally in, wait for it, Jerusalem, of all places, exporting his unique special ideology to a part of the world that can probably live without it. And then there's Erik Prince, the man who founded Blackwater, a company probably more famous for slaughtering civilians a couple of years ago than for its other exploits. Well, he's taking his mercenary expertise to the United Arab Emirates. According to a New York Times report, the Crown Prince of Abu Dhabi is now working with Erik Prince to set up a private, for-profit army that would actually help governments in that region put down those pesky, annoying revolts. And the kicker? This army of mercenaries has a strict no Muslims hiring policy. Now, former American soldiers and special ops commandos are busy training hired guns from Colombia and South Africa and elsewhere in a deal that reportedly earned Prince $500 million so far. So what could possibly go wrong, right? Well, earlier I posed just this question to someone who's very familiar with the shady world of private security contractors. Scott Horton is a contributing editor at Harper's Magazine, and here's part of my conversation with him.
I think we're seeing the potential makings of a major American motion picture. Certainly Erik Prince got himself in very, very deep trouble in the United States. He figured as a name in a number of grand jury investigations that were going on. There were a number of prosecutions brought against Blackwater. The company was forced to change its name and reincorporate. And he himself became a target and decided to bail out of the operation entirely. And in fact, told us he was going to the Gulf, told us he was going to Abu Dhabi. We didn't have a very clear sense before of exactly what he's doing.
He said he was going to teach high school, right?
Yes, he mentioned that he was going to do that. I'm sure he probably is. But I have to say, hats off to Mark Mazzetti, who's done an excellent bit of forensic reporting here and pulling up the stories. And I think it's also fascinating in this sense. In the Arab world, in the Muslim world, there is a long tradition of using Christian mercenaries. There were the Mamelukes in Egypt, for instance, the Janissaries in Istanbul. This was one of the hallmarks of some of the great long dynasties that were established in that part of the world. And now we see the same idea being reintroduced in the 21st century. It's fascinating.
Yeah, no concerns there at all. What's your sense in terms of the potential reach of this army? I mean, what are they going to try to do? What have they been trying to do? What's the stated goal and your sense of the real goal behind this?
Well, if you've been following the news since the middle of February, you know that the Arab world has been swept with upheaval from Morocco to Yemen to Bahrain. In fact, it's largely upheaval that's focused on kleptocratic rulers. Now, most people have identified Abu Dhabi and the Emirates as what may very well be the single most stable state in the entire Arab world. I think that's probably correct. But nevertheless, I think the rulers there are very concerned about these troubles and how they may manifest themselves there. What we've seen in the Gulf now, in many of the states in the Gulf, is a reach to mercenaries, to outside soldiers who have no emotional ties to the local population that may be rising up, and therefore who can be counted upon absolutely to follow the commands of the leader. In fact, we can think of one country in the world where this is going on in a very brutal way, and that's Libya, of course, because Muammar Gaddafi has propped up his regime, drawing heavily on mercenaries who've been brought out of sub-Saharan Africa.
You don't say that Muammar Gaddafi is doing something similar that one of our citizens is. My goodness. But at the end of the day, I mean, we heard the State Department on Sunday say that they were supposedly investigating this issue, but we know that the UAE is a close ally of the United States. What's your sense about the legality of this thing? Do you think that the State Department or the U.S. government knew about this, and is it even legal?
Hard to imagine that the State Department didn't know about it. Of course, the core of his contract relationship with the U.S. government was, in fact, with the State Department, and he's had a number of powerful supporters there. In fact, I did some research earlier in Azerbaijan, Turkmenistan, a number of other countries in which I found U.S. diplomats have been out actively peddling Erik Prince's wares, trying to persuade local governments to hire and use him. So that may have even been the genesis of this relationship in Abu Dhabi. Now, as to the legal side, it's a very complex situation. We have the Neutrality Act going back to the early days of the American Republic that essentially says American citizens are not to involve themselves in military matters and conflicts outside of the United States other than in connection with the United States and the U.S. Armed Forces. That's the law. It has penal sanctions. On the other hand, U.S. enforcement of the law has been highly selective. So there are any number of cases in the past where the U.S. has given its okay, in fact, frequently its affirmative blessing to the involvement of U.S. Soldiers and military contractors working with foreign governments. And I think one thing that we should see here is a little bit more of a probe into this relationship between Erik Prince and the UAE and the role the State Department and the U.S. government has played in it.
That's right. And, of course, we have to keep in mind that the story just broke over the weekend. I'm sure there'll be a lot more details coming out about the story over the coming weeks, and would love to have you back on to chat about all that. Thank you so much for your time, as always. That was Scott Horton, contributing editor of Harper's Magazine.